It is 10 o'clock. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel has requested a trade, initially reported by ESPN's Jeff Darlington, as Samuel seeks a second contract. Jets reporter Connor Hughes of The Athletic followed up that news on Wednesday with a report that the organization currently has no intention of trading Samuel. NBA playoff action in the Eastern Conference last night included the Celtics taking a 2-game lead over the Nets, staging a comeback after going down 17 to win 114-107. 17 points and 6 rebounds for former Tennessee star Grant Williams, who went 100% from the floor and from the free throw line. The 76ers won in overtime to grab a 3-0 lead over Toronto, and the Bulls beat the Bucks to tie the series at 1. In college hoops, Villanova head coach Jay Wright announced his retirement on Wednesday after 21 years, 2 national titles, and 4 Final Four appearances with Villanova, including one this past season. Fordham head coach and former Villanova assistant Kyle Neptune tabbed as Wright's replacement. The Braves fell at the LA Dodgers Wednesday afternoon 5-1 to drop to 6-8 and lose the series, going back home to host the Marlins tomorrow. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising here with you until 1 o'clock. Lucas Panzica's back there making it happen. We got a lot of ground to cover, and we got 3 hours to do it. Happy to have you guys in for the ride. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in if you would like. 615-737-1045. Pete Pranica, we got Memphis Grizzlies playoff basketball to get into. Pete's going to be here in just about 15 minutes. Talk about John Morant trying to get a game up in the series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Pull ahead. Currently tied at 1 apiece. Jon Robinson, Titans general manager, he's expected to meet with the media. I don't know if Vrabel's going to talk today as well, but it's a pre-draft press conference, and you will hear that live on the air at 11:30. So make sure you're listening throughout the course of today's show. So we start with the thing that continues to plague us. We're a week, by the way, a week away and a handful of hours from the NFL draft getting underway. And it will come mercifully. It will not come swiftly enough because in the interim, we've got Deebo Samuel wants a trade and A.J. Brown, cryptic, quote-unquote, tweets and all these different things. Baker Mayfield's podcast habit, whatever. Just loud noises that have filled the air in the NFL news cycle. But one transaction in particular, or one transaction that is being asked for, something that broke in the middle of the radio show yesterday, Deebo Samuel and his trade request to get out of San Francisco, that is going to be interesting to see how long that kind of plays out. Because as we talked about throughout the course of this week, whether it's AJ or Deebo or DK or Terry McLaurin, the teams at this point have the leverage. There is, it seems, and I don't know, it's not like the Federal Trade Commission is going to investigate the NFL for, perhaps clubs colluding to help try and keep the price point down on wide receivers, at least second contract wide receivers, since Jacksonville kind of broke the bank this weekend or this past couple of months. But there seems to be a, belief within these organizations, San Francisco, Tennessee. Seattle is a bit of a different circumstance, and Washington, I don't know what to make of how their organization is run when they're not being investigated by Congress. They are doing all sorts, they're hiding, they're cooking books and things like that. So the functionality of the Washington football team continues to be in question. Tennessee and San Francisco, though, seem to be kind of in a holding pattern, looking at the market and saying, okay, there are hugely productive wide receivers getting paid right now. Tyreek Hill is an all-pro player. Stephon Diggs is a multi-time Pro Bowl player, and I believe he might have made a second-team all-pro last year. I'd have to fact-check that on on Pro Football Reference. But I believe Stephon Diggs, his numbers last year were borderline all-pro after, he and Josh Allen kind of coming together to basically make music on a football field. They were really, really good last year, the pair of them. Davante Adams is considered the best wide receiver in the sport. So they're getting the money that somebody like Christian Kirk has gotten and exceeded that price based on their production. Those guys produce, those guys play in the vast majority of games, and at least here in Tennessee, that's a bit of a question. So the conversation becomes, all right, how much closer to $20 million as opposed to 28 or 30 in the case of Tyreek, how much closer to 20 and even potentially below that are Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown getting offered right now? Because I think that it's trending, the market value for those guys in particular, it's trending in a different direction than what we've seen at the top of the sport, at the very top. A.J. and Deebo may well be there at some point in their career. Stephon Diggs and Davante Adams, they're a couple of years older. Although Stephon Diggs is 28 years old. I think Davante Adams is only 27, and it feels like he's been around forever. Point being, those guys have the production, they have the accolades, they have the resume. And while AJ and Deebo and the other two that we've talked about within this same kind of conversation, while they are good and have the potential to be great and ultimately special kinds of players, we've seen that from them all in different spurts. They are not at the same price point as the guys who are getting outrageous money as the wide receiver market kind of crumbles around us. And here's the thing that makes me wonder about all of this. We talked yesterday specifically about Deebo Samuel, Greg Cosell and myself. We did an episode of The Install. It's a podcast Greg and I do every Wednesday in the 104.5 The Zone podcast network. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast. I asked Greg, hey, what's the value of Deebo Samuel to an NFL football team if he allegedly doesn't want to have running back as a part of his responsibilities anymore? And, Greg's Greg's response, I think, was pretty telling about the whole situation, and not just from Deebo's perspective, but from NFL teams as well.
Well, that's an unknown, because wherever he ends up, they might choose to use him the same way.
Right.
He obviously became a great player a year ago because he was a unique player in the context of the NFL game. Another player who was used similarly on a team that was not very good, and maybe he wasn't as good as Deebo doing it, was Cordarrelle Patterson. Mm-hmm. But there's really very few players who are used that way. And Deebo became a great player, more than just a good receiver, but a great player being deployed in that fashion. There's no telling, unless he says to a team, and I don't think a team would go for it, I will not play running back. Coaches want to win games. That's kind of the way this works, because amazingly enough, Buck, if coaches don't win games, they get fired. So coaches want to win. And it's just like with running backs. No coach thinks in terms of, well, let's only give him 8 carries a game, because we want him to play 10 years. If they feel that they want to give the running back 20 carries a game because that's the best way for them to win every Sunday, that's what they do. So there's no guarantee, no matter what Deebo Samuel thinks, that wherever he goes, he is simply going to be a receiver.
Yeah.
So that's an unknown. So The bottom line point is we're now in a situation where receivers are asking for an awful lot of money. Obviously, Tyreek Hill got it. Some will get it. I'm very anxious to see the future of this, Buck, because when all's said and done, there's always receivers. That's where we are in football, beginning at the peewee level. Because we now live in a world of 7-on-7 beginning at a young age. There's always receivers. Every year, receivers are either the most drafted or very close to the most drafted position. And that's only going to continue. So it's going to be interesting as this progresses how teams deal with it, because there's always going to be receivers that are available. And hey,
so that's Greg Cosell, and we go into some detail on that. This is the larger point. NFL teams are going to adapt in some form or fashion to the idea that the receiver is not worth the kind of money that they're spending on them right now. At some point, now, I'm not saying that Tyreek Hill is not a $30 million a year player. By the way, that's the highest paid non-quarterback currently after the trade from Kansas City and the extension that Miami gave him with years left on his deal. Average of $30 million per season. Pretty damn good. But at some point, I mean, Blaine Bishop's talked about this before. There's not another Tyreek Hill in the league. There's not another Tyreek Hill potentially in NFL history. The dude is singular in his ability, in his skill set, in his athletic potential. And we've seen the heights of that. The heights of that are what gets rewarded at $30 million per season. But if you've got competent quarterback play, you don't need the $30 million receiver. Miami doesn't have competent quarterback play. People around the league don't think that Miami has competent quarterback play. And so what do? If you're trying to cover up some warts at that position, well, you try and put as much as humanly possible around that quarterback and try and work around his limitations with a gifted play caller and all of the best skill position talent that you can get your hands on.
Or find out what you have in your quarterback.
Well, that's how you find out.
Right.
I mean, we're going to find Tua is arguably in the NFL this year. Ryan Tannehill is under considerable pressure here, I would think, in Tennessee. And it's ironic that, the former Dolphins quarterback and the current Dolphins quarterback, the one who replaced Ryan Tannehill, are currently under duress. Although, was there a Jay Cutler? Were there a couple Jay Cutler years in there? There was
one Jay Cutler year.
And there was a Ryan Fitzpatrick year, I think, between Tua and Tannehill.
The Titans played against Jay Cutler with the Dolphins. With Matt Castle starting for the Titans.
What a miserable time.
Yeah, that happened.
What a terrible time in NFL history. Shout out to Jay Cutler, though. He got $10 million, I think, that year to just go hang out in a condo
I think
in Miami.
He was going to retire and start doing television.
No, he's going to go in the booth, him and Jeff Fisher.
Right. That's right.
It was a whole thing. And all of us looked around and was like, would those two be good? And turns out, yes, they are exceptional at being personalities because you're starting to get to know these people. Anyway, point being, there is going to be a return to center. A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, and the rest of these guys, the younger guys who are looking and salivating at the money being made and calling their agents and being like, hey, man, I think I'm worth something like that too. And the league is telling them, their teams are telling them, come on, Sparky. You got a little more work to do before you end up being a 26, 27, 28, or $30 million a year player. And that's the conflict between the representation for these wide receivers and their organizations right now. 615-737-1045. Jump in on the conversation if you like. Pete Pranica, voice and face of the Memphis Grizzlies, is going to be here in just a second to talk about the other face of the Memphis Grizzlies, Jon Morant, and the absolute tear that he is getting ready to go on. That's next. All right, we got playoff basketball tonight, kids. Memphis Grizzlies back in action, trying to pull a game ahead in this first-round series. We got the voice, the face, the man himself of the Memphis Grizzlies, Pete Pranica, on the line with us. The game is on Bally Sports tonight. You can watch them breaking it down in great detail. Pete, how we living?
Everything is good. We're here in Minneapolis. We're just wrapping up our television production meeting to get ready for tonight's game. So 6 o'clock for Grizzlies Live, and then a 6:30 tip here from Target Center. And looking forward to carrying the momentum from Game 2 into Game 3.
So where did you see that momentum shift, right? Because I think everybody around the league, Pete, not just in Memphis, thought that it was a surprise that Minnesota came out the way that they did, or rather Memphis came out the way that they did in Game 1. And all they did in Game 2 was respond with the largest margin of victory in Grizzlies history, a 28-point win over Minnesota in Game 2. What did you see that changed?
I think it was just attention to detail, adherence to the game plan, playing with force. Minnesota came in, I think, with a tremendous amount of momentum because they had a big fourth quarter rally at home to beat the Clippers to get into the 7th seed. So they were feeling really good about themselves and playing with great confidence. And the Grizzlies I thought they came out a little tight in Game 1. I think almost a little too amped up in the playoff atmosphere. And I think that hurt them. And Minnesota was playing with a great deal of confidence. Anthony Edwards gets off to a great first quarter. I mean, Minnesota set a franchise playoff record with 41 points in the first quarter. That's not Grizzlies basketball. And we had a foul-filled first quarter of Game 2. But there was an element of physicality that the Grizzlies brought in Game 2 that they didn't really bring in Game 1. The defense was much better, and they shot threes a whole lot better too, because you have to do that because Minnesota's a very good three-point shooting team.
Well, and Pete Pranica, voice of the Memphis Grizzlies, here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Memphis back in action tonight. You can catch the coverage starting with Grizzlies Live at 6:30 on Bally Sports. All of the start-stop fouling, all of the fouling that you talked about there, Pete, it threw the entire flow of the game early on into disruption, and it wasn't really until a pretty decent chunk into the second quarter that you felt like Memphis kind of hit their stride and started to pull away, and then very much had that game in hand basically the rest of the way through. How much of an impact did the officiating have in that first quarter? Because it seemed like it was awful ticky-tack stuff.
It definitely disrupted the flow or prevented really any flow.
Yeah.
But look, the 2-7 matchups in both conferences are both exceptionally physical. The referees know this. And I think what happened, too, is when Patrick Beverley takes that foul against John Morant and slaps down and Morant gets the ball in his face and there's an early tech, I think the crew is like, okay, we need to rein this thing in before it gets out of hand, somebody gets hurt. And so they called it very tightly. And then after that, the players adjusted, they adapted. I think the Grizzlies adapted better than Minnesota did to the way the game was being called. And that's what you have to do. I mean, the referees have to do what they have to do. And with playoff intensity, if you let too much stuff go, you run the risk of the game getting out of control, and that's the last thing you want to have.
The minutes that Steven Adams is getting or has gotten and did not get in Game 2 has been a topic of conversation, how they kind of envision his role. What's been his response to, basically I think he only had 3 in Game 2, Pete, before he ended up being benched the rest of the way. How has he responded to that, role adjustment?
It's coach, whatever we need to do to win the game. And Taylor Jenkins was almost apologetic to Steven after the game, and Steven said, Coach, we won the game. Yeah. And that's all he cares about. I mean, he's a total pro. Don't know if the Grizzlies are going to change their starting lineup tonight, but certainly Xavier Tillman proved his worth as being very effective against Karl Anthony Towns. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, you don't want to totally discount Steven Adams' rebounding prowess, but by the same token, it's not the best matchup for the Grizzlies against Karl Anthony Towns. So it'll be intriguing to watch how the rotations work tonight. I don't think that it'll be a situation where you just don't see Steven Adams at all, because certainly he's a quality rebounder, and you're going to need some physicality on the glass. But for him to track Karl Anthony Towns out to the three-point line, that's a big ask for Steven. So it's definitely something that'll bear watching. And Grizzlies grateful that Xavier Tillman played as well as he did, and he played to his capability. We all know that he has this ability, and when called upon, he produced in Game 2.
D'Angelo Russell, I mean, Minnesota's got a couple of interesting players, but D'Angelo Russell has the ability to hurt you. He does seem to be fairly streaky, though, just throughout the course of his career. And Memphis has done a good job kind of keeping a handle on him and making Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns have to work a little harder. What have you made of that matchup and how they've kind of controlled Russell through this series so far?
Well, what they've done really well, I think their closeouts have been disciplined. They've been forcing D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, for that matter, to take fadeaways. And the shots that D'Angelo Russell's taking now, they're very, very difficult shots. And one of the shots he made in Game 2 is a circus shot. He's just trying to draw a foul and fling it toward the basket. So all you can do against a gifted scorer like D'Angelo Russell is, can you make him uncomfortable? Can you make him take the shots you want him to take rather than let him dictate and he gets the shots that he wants? I think the Grizzlies have done a better job of dictating defensively, and that's been a big reason why Russell has, at least to this point, has been quiet offensively.
Pete Pranica, voice of the Grizzlies, here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Game 3 tonight in their series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Catch it on Bally Sports. Coverage starts at 6:30. Just from the standpoint of an outside observer, Pete, like, I love the way that Anthony Edwards carries himself. I know Karl Anthony Towns is the veteran there, and, Karl Anthony Towns' experience in Minnesota is the subject of some debate, but the way that Anthony Edwards just seems to think that he's the best player, not just on the court, but in the league as far as the mentality that he projects, I really, really enjoy, especially the back and forth of these two teams having exciting personalities and players like Edwards, and on the other side, Ja.
Yeah, Edwards plays with a tremendous amount of confidence, and for me, the thing is, you've got to make sure Anthony Edwards misses his first 3 or 4 shots, and then he's a different player. If he makes the first 3 or 4 shots, then you have an issue. And there was a first quarter here where he just totally went off. I think in the first meeting here in Minnesota, and he gets on a roll. He doesn't think he'll ever miss again. And when he's playing with that level of confidence, then he becomes an exceptionally tough cover. But when he's not shooting real well, then things can go really south for him. So, can the Grizzlies hit first, be aggressive defensively first, and force those guys into tough shots? That's going to tell the tale not only of this game, but really the rest of the series.
We'll all find out together when we tune into Bally Sports to watch Pete and the crew tonight. Pete, appreciate the time as always, and looking forward to chatting about some playoff basketball down the line.
Great. Thanks for having me.
That's Pete Pranica. They're with us on 104.5 The Zone. I think that as far as this series is concerned, the thing that I've observed, because Kentucky fans know what the Karl Anthony Towns experience is, right? Just to kind of bring it back to a local-ish level. Karl Anthony Towns was on that team. I think I was still in college when they ended up losing to Wisconsin, Lucas, if I remember correctly. Was that the Final Four? They made it to the Final Four and lost to Wisconsin.
Undefeated. Yeah.
They were undefeated up until that point. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Frank Kaminsky.
Frank the Tank.
Oh, my goodness. What a time to be alive. But Karl Anthony Towns, a part of that Kentucky team, super dominant, comes into the league with all these kinds of expectations. And the way that he plays, man, when I'm watching basketball last night and I'm watching the way that Joel Embiid at 7+ feet is coming out on the perimeter and sinking a 3 to end the game and crush the souls of all the Raptors fans in attendance, Karl Anthony Towns, when you see a man that size in professional basketball, anybody that size in professional basketball, pull up from range and have that kind of efficiency, it's like a marvel. But what we know Joel Embiid does is he'll go down and bang in the post as well. Karl Anthony Towns, when he has the option to go down and get dirty in the paint, he'll still pull up from range at that same size. Now, Joel's thicker. It's a different physical construction, even though they have the similar height, similar length. But the thing that always has bothered me about Karl Anthony Towns' game is just He doesn't seem to have that kind of toughness that I think is required for a player at that size. The 7-foot three-point shooter is a novelty. But if he can't give you the things in the post that you require, it's nothing more than a novelty. It's not an additional part of its game. He seems to be a bit one-dimensional from that standpoint. You've got things like Pat Beverly crying after the play-in and all this stuff. They seem to be, if they can harness Minnesota, just talking about this, if they can harness their emotion, they're a dangerous team. Those three players together, Anthony Edwards, Pat Beverly, Karl Anthony Towns, they've got something to them, and we've seen their energy and the way that they can dominate when they're playing loose, right? Pete said it best. You once you start getting into Anthony Edwards a little bit, you force him to miss his first 3 or 4 shots, you get him out of rhythm early, and you can see that same energy kind of boil over in ways that a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, that is, I think by league standards, still pretty young. And, I mean, Steven Adams is the veteran. Steven Adams, who looks like he should be 45 and has, this New Zealand pirate aesthetic going on to him. How old do you think, actually look this up, because I think this would be a funny game. I think that Steven Adams, who played with the Oklahoma City Thunder and then has come to, he's been in a couple different places before coming to Memphis. I feel like he's been in the league for a long time, and I feel like he should be 45. How actually old is that giant?
Well, what's your actual guess? Because it's not 45.
I will say 32.
He's 28.
That's ridiculous.
Not even 30.
He's my age.
He's been in the league since 2013.
Steven Adams been around for a hot minute. That's what I'm saying. So, like, when Steven Adams, 28 years old, is one of your most senior members, one of your most veteran members, and you still perform like a veteran team, I mean, I have every confidence that Memphis is capable of winning every game the rest of the way out. Like, Minnesota got one. I think the Grizzlies can go 4 straight. But, I'm excited for playoff basketball, and I wonder how far do the Grizzlies have to make it before this becomes, okay, a thing that people want to get into, get behind. Was this a thing for the Preds in 2017 or around then? Because it felt to me, just looking at regional sports, hockey in Nashville, NBA in Memphis, it felt like that Preds season where they squeak in as the 8th seed and they go on to sweep Chicago and all the good feels, it really didn't feel like people had bought in until the second win over Chicago. Like, I think we do the analysis in retrospect to say, oh yeah, that Preds team was the most fun. You had every confidence that that core group of players, Subban, Forsberg, Ryan Johansson, Arvidsson, you had every confidence, Pecorine at the height of his game. You had every confidence that they were going to get the Stanley Cup, which was, of course, not the conversation basically a week before the postseason. I don't know if Memphis has to make the conference finals for people to get invested that way. Like, I don't remember at what point. It felt earlier, though, because of the way that they came out firing with Nashville in the Stanley Cup run, the way that they swept Chicago that way. That really felt like people were involved, and also because it came against a very much hated rival.
But with Memphis, the expectations have been there for almost the entire season. I mean, they've had the 2 seed clinched for weeks. I think conference final would be the floor for a lot of people.
Man, I like them against the Suns, too, if they were able to get to the conference finals, because I did not realize that Devin Booker had gone out with a hamstring. I did not see that injury the other night, and I haven't watched every NBA playoff game so far, but obviously the Suns, who were great last year, have been playing at an even higher level when you look at the metrics on them than they were a year ago, and are the favorite in the West to come out of the West. I think that without Devin Booker, that conversation very, very much changes, because you don't have that kind of explosive scorer. Chris Paul is a distributor first and foremost. They have a lot there to work with, but I think Memphis would be favored. I think if Devin Booker, because it's a hamstring, that's not going away. It's unfortunate, because that's a fun basketball team. I'm watching Jalen Rose on television right now break a lot of this down.
It would be fascinating to see the response from Nashville if Memphis got all the way to the NBA Finals.
I mean, if they're in the NBA Finals, people are going to get down with it, right?
I don't know, because I can't tell you what the reaction was in the city of Memphis when the Preds made the Stanley Cup Finals. I have no idea.
I don't know that. But even in Nashville, there was kind of like this reticence to buy in on the Preds until after the Chicago sweep, right?
That season, sure, because like you said, they had to sneak into the postseason. This is different with this Memphis team.
Lonzo Wright on the YouTube chat where you can stream the show, Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch says, I should DVR the NBA playoff game or playoff play-in games that I'm missing. Because I'm an anti-DVR or rewatching of live sports proponent.
No, people do that. People that like sports do that.
What are you implying? You're implying that I don't like live sports enough to go back and watch them?
Clearly.
I DVR Titans games because I'll watch the television copy before I go back and watch Game Pass. Like, I want to see what you see first before I go back and watch the coach's film that we have access to. Other than that, no, it's okay.
The playoffs have been fun, though. There's been a lot of drama, a lot of juice in these NBA playoffs.
I've enjoyed them very much. And it's, there wasn't quite the drama. For example, the Celtics beat the Nets last night.
But there is drama in that series.
Oh, yeah, because the Nets down 0-2.
Yeah, and Kyrie Irving was awful last night.
And Steve Nash is probably thinking, oh, my God, they're going to fire me. They're going to fire me. Because I've survived all of these different things. I've survived Kyrie being able to attend playoff games but not actually play in them because of New York's Banana Republic vaccination requirements and things of this nature. I've survived all of this nonsense and all of Kyrie walking around the court with his sage, trying to exercise the demons before he takes the court and ends up having, 42 one night? And I don't know what his stat line.
He had 10 last night.
Was it only 10?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they combined. Durant had 27, but still. So you knew you weren't going to hold both of them down. Like, KD wasn't going to look like that.
Well, KD struggled too.
Again. No, they played good defense. The Celtics have had a good plan. The Celtics have had a good plan for these two guys to kind of mitigate what it is that Brooklyn does so well and to not let them just out-athlete you, outscore you in these critical moments. In the critical moment before the playoff or the game one buzzer-beating layup, the best part of that sequence, I don't think, was the layup. I thought it was the defense that they played on Kyrie at the other end of the court to get the opportunity for the layup.
Grant Williams pitching a perfect game last night. Perfect from the floor, from three, and the free throw line, and no turnovers. 17 points.
Look at you. You're glowing for your guy, Grant Williams. I didn't know he was getting that kind of minutes. I can't say that I've watched a ton of Boston Celtics games before the playoffs began, but I didn't realize he was that kind of a rotational player.
Yeah, I didn't think he had been that reliable of a scoring option for the Celtics, but he quietly was last night. 32 minutes off the bench.
Kind of stuff you'll love to see. 615-737-1045 is the number. There was a massive story last night in the sports world, and it kind of caught everybody by surprise, but I love the story itself, and we'll tell you what that is coming up next.
The Buck Reising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Visit springhillac.com.
Welcome back. Lucas, I'm concerned for our well-being today. Not yours, mostly mine.
My well-being or your well-being?
Well, I think unfortunately for both of us that we are tied together no matter what kind of errors one or the other of us commits, it's going to be attributed to us both in a workplace setting.
Unless it's on your Twitter account.
Well, yeah, but people are onto you. They're onto your shtick at this point. They know who's actually behind my Twitter account.
See how far I can take it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've pushed it pretty far. We try to get me canceled over will the Bachelorettes pay for it or not? Goodness. No context polls are the best. But I'm concerned for our professional well-being today because there is a bit of a feud, an intra-office feud here in at least the Zone studio. The Cumulus Nashville environment, very copacetic.
Seamless.
But the rest of it, war zone. Now, it's Will Bowling this morning instead of Jason with Ramon, although there was like 75 people in here hosting the morning show the other day. I don't know what the hell happened. There was Ron Slay came out of a ceiling tile. I saw Rhett Bryan rappel down from the roof to drop
Slay
in front of a
there.
microphone. I'm pretty sure Slay's sleeping up there. I mean, he's sleeping everywhere else. And he's not, huffing down strikeout wings. But the point being, there is often, we work in shifts, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. All of the shows are different lengths, although I guess our show is as long as 3HL. There is 2 hours between us and 3HL, Lucas. There is 5 hours between J-Mart and Ramon and 3HL. And yet food in the studio from the morning show is the kind of thing, any remnants of it, is the kind of thing that drives Dawn Davenport crazy, which is, of course, the most volatile personality of all of us. I'm probably up there, but I think I have to cede the throne to Dawn, just in terms of, she'll be incredibly sweet to you 1 minute and then hit you between the ribs with a shiv the next. That is Dawn Davenport in a nutshell.
But she'll always have a reason. It's not unprompted.
She will have a reason. Whether or not that reason is merited is an entirely different conversation. But such is life. I have these same kind of eccentricities. Now, I don't mind. I have no issue when Jason and Ramon have breakfast in the studio. If they're going to come in here at 4:30 in the morning, they can do whatever the hell they want, as far as I'm concerned. So long as I'm not the one who has to schlep in here at 4:30 in the morning, good with me. And I don't rarely. Every once in a while we'll order in lunch, but I don't leave remnants of it in the studio. Today, I feel that we are going to get found out because I had a bagel and lox sandwich during the commercial break that I Uber Eats'd. Onion, capers, lox, garlic cream cheese. This thing is, I maintain the lox bagel sandwich is the best of the breakfast sandwiches, but there's definitely an odor. And it's going to take me a minute to eat it because it's a monster, an absolute monster. I've already had to fight Lucas off. He's like a buzzard circling during the commercial break trying to see if he can come in here and get free food. I literally brought it into the studio before I'd opened the package. He looks at me and goes, "You going to finish that?"
Yeah, let me know when you get full over there.
Just back to the shadows. So I think that today is going to be the first time that we actually commit an infraction, a smell infraction against Dawn Davenport.
Except it won't be a scandal because we've just confessed on the air.
Well, no, but we have wrongly been blamed before for this nonsense.
Yes, that is true.
Which is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. But apparently there is news. So do we want to break it? Am I going to get the breaking news sounder?
I don't think it's necessarily worth the breaking news.
This is a fun game that I like to play now where I try to beat you to the breaking news. Oh!
Breaking sports news on 104.5 The Zone.
Give it to me.
The Buffalo Bills have signed David Quezenberry, starting right tackle for the Tennessee Titans in 2021. He will be reunited with Roger Saffold on the same offensive line once again.
Now, that's interesting. I can't think of who played right tackle for the Buffalo Bills last year.
Well, Taylor Lewan played left tackle, of course.
Famously. according to NBA insider Chris Broussard. It's such a stupid thing. I'm not even mad at Chris. It's not Chris's fault that they're throwing him up there on, whatever. These Fox shows have such ridiculous names, and they all sound the same. Speak for yourself. First things first. Undisputed. Chris Broussard, who's an NBA reporter by trade, is being asked a question about a Bills-Titans game from like week 7. So, I'll cut Chris a little bit of slack. But the offensive line is a big question. We're going to get into this. Jon Robinson, Titans general manager, is going to speak to the media from St. Thomas Sports Park at 11:30. Again, I am unclear. I should probably send a text to find out whether Mike Vrabel is going to speak to the media today as well, but certainly we will carry a portion of that for you guys because this is one of this is the pre-draft press conference. So with that being said, we'll talk more about the offensive line because the Quezenberry signing by Buffalo obviously means that he is clearly and obviously not coming back. So we know now definitively there are 2 jobs open on the Titans offensive line that are up for grabs, and there will need to be competition from both guys internally and from the upcoming draft class because I think they would benefit from 1, if not 2, offensive linemen. But we'll have time to get back into that in about 10 minutes. What I want to talk about here is Jay Wright. Jay Wright retired yesterday. It wasn't quiet because Jay Wright is a national championship winning coach at Villanova, but I believe it was The Athletic who first had the story. Just that Jay Wright had called together a team meeting and informed his staff and his players, hey, I'm 60 years old. I'm probably good on this. I'm gonna be okay. He steps away without any fanfare. His team, by the way, made it as far as Coach K's did this year. And Coach K, is doing victory laps. Coach K is still being photographed with pictures of puppy dogs out on the internet. I don't know why he's trying to propagate this likability tour. I'll still hate you, K, until the end of time. That's just the college basketball fan in me.
Please, everyone be quiet.
No, I will not. I will not. You be quiet. Because Jay Wright, Jay Wright, so of the college coaches, Bill Self just won the title, right? So Bill Self is probably going to be viewed as the best remaining college basketball coach.
Only coach with multiple national titles.
Right. Tom Izzo has not won one in a considerable amount of time. They do not seem to be terribly close to getting back to championship caliber levels at Michigan State, at least in the immediate under Tom Izzo. So I probably would have said after Bill Self, Scott Drew at Baylor, and Jay Wright at Villanova, those are probably the 3 best college basketball coaches that we have. But none are transcendent, right? Jay Wright at least you, I don't know. You recognize him. He was a part of one of the most dramatic college basketball finishes that we've ever had. He's got the famous, you see the shot go up in the air with 0.2 seconds left on the clock while it's halfway to the basket. You see Jay Wright, the camera angle on him, mouth bang, and it goes in, and the confetti flies. I think that was 2016, that championship game. Fantastic basketball, wire to wire. The entire time. Jay Wright famously, he's the upset here is that the actual news here is that Jay Wright is only 60 or is even 60. Like that's outrageous that man looks
so he was
he does at 60 years old.
39 when he took that job. 21 years at Villanova.
Which has come I think that in and of itself, 21 years at Nova, I think that's flown tremendously under the radar. But, he's the closest thing that we had an institution in college basketball. I think by default, Tom Izzo gets that just because he's the more famous of those coaches. Because Bill Self, the thing that he's most famous for is being consistently under investigation, and how much longer are you going to get to hold on to this title with Rick Pitino waiting in the wings, outside looking in as he tries to worm his way back in there from Iona.
And Alex Apple does text me and remind me that Pitino is the other active coach with multiple national titles, though I guess that can be disputed now with one being vacated.
Yeah, he's just got the one
just
at Kentucky. But the tattoo, the Louisville tattoo is for life. So, unfortunate to see Jay Wright step away from college basketball. It will be interesting to see the void that gets filled there. When we get ready to talk about this draft conversation, I want to talk about the biggest contrast between the way that we, you, me, Lucas, everybody outside of football facilities, the disconnect between the way that we talk about the draft and the way the people who are responsible for doing the draft look at this thing. I'll tell you what that is exactly with Greg Cosell coming up next.
It is 11:02. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. We are 1 week away from the 2022 NFL Draft in Las Vegas. Titans general manager Jon Robinson set to speak to the media and give his pre-draft address coming up at 11:30. You can hear the GM's comments right here on 104.5 The Zone. The Buffalo Bills have signed former Titans offensive lineman David Quezenberry to a one-year deal. Another former Titan headed up to Buffalo as Quezenberry reunites with Roger Saffold on the same offensive line unit. In big college hoops news on Wednesday, Villanova head coach Jay Wright announced his retirement after 21 years, 2 national titles, and 4 Final Four appearances as the head coach at Nova, including one this past season. Fordham head coach and former Villanova assistant Kyle Neptune tabbed as Wright's replacement. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Hour number 2, off and rolling. Welcome in to 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back if you've been hanging with us so far today. Would you hit the music button on accident? What happened there? It went abruptly down. It went abruptly back up. Oh, you're eating. That's Lucas Panzica, if you're watching on Zone TV. He came in here. I ordered breakfast for myself. Somehow during the commercial break, he came and stole half of my breakfast away. Scavenger. Like a hyena, just roaming the halls of the Cumulus Nashville building looking for scraps. Shame on you, truly. He can't respond because he's got a mouthful of bagel and lox. This is the best time. I couldn't
defend myself. Now I can't. I have nothing to say.
Yeah, get the capers out of your teeth. 615-737-1045 is the number. That's how you jump in, if you'd like. Jon Robinson going to jump into the mix with the Titans media here in just about 20 minutes from now. He's going to hold his pre-draft press conference because we are a week away from the first round of the NFL draft, a week away in just a few hours from the NFL draft officially, mercifully, getting underway. I think that there's a couple of things that I want to hear from Jon Robinson on. And I know that my colleagues who will be able to attend the press conference in person will carry it for you live here on the air. But I know that this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of questions asked. I think that there's over-under, Lucas, over-under 4 questions about A.J. Brown and his contract status. Those are the same thing.
Oh, give me the over. Yeah, if we're
over
lumping,
4.
Yes, if we're lumping all of that in together. And now, do questions about the wide receiver market as a whole count in that?
I think they should not. I think it should be specific to AJ and his contract.
I'll still take the over.
Okay, so 4 times will Jon Robinson be asked about AJ Brown and his contract situation, even though that has been addressed several times. What one question? And I'll ask you this, 615-737-1045. What one question would you want Jon Robinson to answer today? What do you need to hear from the Titans general manager 1 week ahead of the NFL draft? I think for me, when I kind of look at all the different team needs and how everything has come about in the last couple of weeks, and really the last couple of months, really this entire offseason, because we haven't heard in some form or fashion from Jon since the NFL owners meetings, which, by the way, was the last time that he declared that they were working very hard to keep A.J. Brown and to make sure that A.J. Brown is a Titan for a long time. A.J. is a Titan now, I believe I'm paraphrasing the quote from Jim Wyatt, but A.J. is currently a Titan. We want to keep him a Titan, was basically the line from Jon Robinson. It's not the first time that he's gone on record in that. In fact, if I'm Jon Robinson, I'm probably tired of people not listening to me when I speak about this thing and just continuing to propagate the nonsense anyway. So what one question would you want to ask Jon Robinson? Because from my standpoint, I think I want to know what he thinks of this wide receiver situation writ large. I want to know what he thinks about the market shift that we have seen at that position, and at what point do you have to take a step back and say, hey, I mean, damn, guys, like just because one team, the Jacksonville Jags, fouled it up for us this offseason doesn't mean the rest of us have to be dragged by our hair alongside. Now, we all know what the cap is and is not in the NFL, and we've seen the Rams make an absolute mockery of it, so I'm sure many of you don't want to hear about financial implications of overpaying potentially A.J. Brown or a contract that would exceed what his resume indicates that he's actually earned outside of just potential. And also taking into account you're probably paying for the prime years of A.J. Brown coming up at only 25 years old. But from my standpoint, I want to know how much of this is bogging down things like A.J.'s negotiations. Because he has to be looking at John Lynch in San Francisco, who's trying to negotiate one of these contracts, I don't even know. Who's the general manager of the Washington football team right now? Could you name him?
No. No, I can't.
Wow. I know Ron Rivera's the head coach. I don't know. I don't know who the general manager of the Washington football team is at this point in time. I think this year I've struggled more to learn the new names and faces than any other year.
Martin Mayhew.
Yeah, no idea.
Martin Mayhew.
Now, Martin Mayhew has been around the league before, but I had zero idea that Martin Mayhew was the general. Anyway, Martin Mayhew.
Yeah, well, he was since last year.
And John Lynch.
Came from San Francisco.
And Jon Robinson. And everybody else who's trying to negotiate wide receiver contracts right now. They're probably on group text with one another being like, damn you, Trent Baalke.
Yeah, he's just talking smack about Trent Baalke.
You mother... How dare you pay a wide receiver who's never had 1,000 yards in his career that kind of money? You've banged the rest of us. Straight to hell, Trent Baalke, no speed bumps. And then at the same time, because this happened in a couple different positions, and I can't figure out exactly why this is the case other than these are two unique circumstances. Because at the same time, where you've got, say, the Baltimore Ravens negotiating a quarterback contract right now with a former MVP of the NFL, and the Browns turn around and give the guy who's accused of sexual impropriety, 22 counts to be exact, civilly, they give that guy $230 million, the most guaranteed money in the history of the sport. And now Lamar's looking at the Ravens like, hey, I'm better than that guy. My resume's better than that guy. I want $260 million guaranteed. And Steve Bisciotti, the Ravens owner, is looking at Jimmy and Dee Haslam from their scared Zoom call as they trot everybody else out to face the music in person in front of the Cleveland media, and they Skype in from afar about the Deshaun Watson stuff. Steve Bisciotti with the Ravens is looking at Jimmy Haslam with double middle fingers. Bleep you. What are you doing? See what you've done to the rest of us. Now, I think it's just purely consequence or what's the word that I'm looking for? I don't think that this was intentionally done by the Browns to do something, to hamstring the Ravens in their contract negotiations. I don't think that they're that savvy. But this is the kind of thing that executives in football are talking about. And I want to know Jon Robinson's opinion on that. In fact, I'm going to have to pepper some people who are going to be in attendance in person at the press conference with that question because I would like the answer to that. What one question would you like to ask the general manager? Gator Mike is in Nashville, wants to weigh in this morning. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Buck, how you doing today?
I'm well, boss.
Hey, a couple of things first, and then I'll get to my question. First off, I'm a strong advocate of 104.5 The Zone. I will not tolerate any Buck Reising slander on any other show. So just so you know, I've got your back.
Look at you. I appreciate that, Mike. The Army is strong. Thank you much.
Yes. But secondly, as it reverts back to last week, or maybe earlier this week, I think we do need to have a Buck Reising intervention, and Lucas can kind of get some people in on that. Because if you're spending 12 hours on your cell phone, Buck, and you do a 3-hour radio show, and then you're able to see stuff at night, you're sleeping the other time, That's way too much time on your phone, Buck.
and that's in the downtime, Mike. That's in the downtime. I can
Right,
I get close to
even peak
16.
NFL.
I get close to 16, 17 during the season. It's gross. I'm telling you, I'm gonna have an iPhone 12 size tumor in my skull.
That's right. Hey, surely now with this David Quezenberry news, I mean, surely don't we have to address offensive line with that first pick? I mean, surely that's got to be where he's leaning now, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure that they understand their needs as well as we all do, Mike, and thank you for the call and for the support, because I was attacked. I was assaulted on J. Martin Ramon this morning because somebody took offense with my don't DVR live sports take. Check the internet. People came after me for that.
It's a bad take.
It's just not. It's just simply not. If you want to live like a caveman, you do you. The rest of us will live in the 21st century. I don't think they have to do anything at 26 because the only reason I say that, Mike, is because they have no earthly idea what's going to happen. I think that the unsexy part of this draft is I very much think, just based on talking to NFL people and my friends who cover other teams in the league, it's entirely possible we see a run on offensive linemen and edge guys or defensive linemen, front seven players in the first round. Now, how that impacts the Titans at 26, none of us can anticipate, none of us can project, because that is a considerable amount of talent that will have to go before them. So, if there is best player available at 26 and he happens to be an offensive lineman, go get him. Go get him. Break glass in case of emergency scenario, it's Nakobe Dean at 26. If he's the best player available on their board, I think there would be riots in the street. I think there would be pitchforks. I think there would be torches outside of St. Thomas Sports Park. But it is incumbent upon them to find ways to make the best possible football player in the first round work under their system. If he's good enough, find a way to make him work. That's the coaching, right? But I think the offensive line needs are clear and obvious, and I think that it's going to be multiple offensive linemen in the first round this year, and not just because they have two starting openings now available. We'll get more of your phone calls on this coming up next. Jon Robinson is going to speak to the media. Stick right there. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back. Got to get up. Get up for draft season, baby. We are almost there. Jon Robinson, Titans general manager, going to hop on a mic here in just about 10 minutes. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in on the conversation. What one question would you like to ask the general manager? Mike Vrabel is going to speak to the media as well, so we will hear from both of them in just about 10 minutes from now. Let's go to Jason, who's in Murfreesboro, who wants to chime in. Hello, Jason.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing today?
We're well, thank you.
I had a question. Maybe not so much to ask the general manager, but how hard is it for them to pick up Deebo Samuel to go with A.J. Brown? Like, if you give A.J. Brown hey, Deebo Samuel's coming, that might change the way he's like, oh, I don't have to have that much. Like, to make a Super Bowl team, you have to give up some to make it, to have all the great players on your team. I'll let y'all comment.
So that's probably going to be a common question, right? And Deebo Samuel right now, immediately, and by the way, for the rest of the season, because they're both asking for extensions. I think there's some confusion there, right? Difference between giving them money right now or any time prior to I can't remember when the cutoff point is for extensions to be negotiated before players are able to hit outright free agency. These two, Deebo and AJ, are going to, provided they get an extension done, they're going to play at this 2022 price point regardless of whether they get future money on their current deal. So theoretically, could you do this? Yes, but Deebo is not coming anywhere. And listen, he doesn't have a no-trade clause, so it's not like he's got the kind of leverage, say, Deshaun Watson did. But Deebo Samuel is going to be traded with the understanding that he's going to get a lucrative extension, more apparently than the 49ers are willing to offer him at his next stop. You can't have two $20+ million wide receivers on your roster. You can't. You simply can't.
But I think the idea there was, one of them taking significantly less for the better chance to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Right, which just doesn't really happen.
Tom Brady did that, and everybody thinks that that's something that everybody should do. People don't do that.
Well, Brady is a whole different...
Completely, but that's the example, right?
Right, well, Cooper Kupp now is the latest example of
Cooper
that.
Kupp can kiss my ass with that. He is out of his mind.
Sure, but people are going to use that, is all I'm saying.
What did Cooper Kupp say, just for reference for the audience? Because I know what you're talking about,
right.
but they don't.
He essentially said, he doesn't want to be a market-setting wide receiver with a new contract. He said for him, it's better about being comfortable with where you are and being the right place for both sides. That's more of a priority to him than being the highest-paid receiver in NFL history.
It's a lovely sentiment. Cooper Kupp is conducting himself in the way that every fan wants their players to conduct themselves, and also it is completely detached from the actual reality of what the NFL marketplace is. Guys don't take less money to win rings. I think you would be shocked at how many professional athletes, not just the NFL, how much more you, as a fan, value the idea of a championship than the professional athlete who is doing this for generational wealth. Now, I'm not saying that those guys are completely extinct. I'm not saying that at all. But, be realistic about this. Truly be realistic about this. Would you rather have a shot at a championship, which matters? You go down in NFL history. You are remembered forever in some form or fashion, or would you rather make enough money that you never have to worry about anything ever again, basically?
For you and maybe for generations.
For several generations, for your children, for their children, okay? The answer, more often than not, is going to be yeah, give me the bag. Was it Malik Jackson? Was that the defensive lineman on the Broncos Super Bowl team that went down and got the bag from Jacksonville?
Former Tennessee player, yep.
And he was up front about it. He was like, yeah, this was a crazy amount of money that they were offering me. The Jags still at the time paying that our team stinks, will overpay you, come play for us, tax. Malik Jackson was honest about that. He's like, yeah, they gave me the best offer.
You think Christian Kirk's more likely to win a Super Bowl in Arizona or in Jacksonville?
Cliff Kingsbury, the coach? I don't know.
Yeah, well, still.
Push. Chuck and Clarksville.
We think so little of Cliff Kingsbury.
I think very little of Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think little of Chuck in Clarksville, who joins us next. Hello, Chuck.
Hey, Buck. Hey, I got a draft question for Jon Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Given the Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley drafts that have not worked out the way he probably wanted, how careful are you going to be this year if you come up with another, say, a Jameson Williams incident with a knee injury to draft that player, or are you going to, feel the pressure of passing and going to more safe pick?
It's a great question, right? Now, again, the answer comes down to, okay, well, who's on the board, right? And that's going to be the way that he ducks a question like that, because John doesn't want to talk about the things that he screwed up or past drafts. He wants to talk about these guys, these players. Talk about look ahead, not backwards, silly. But this is a narrative, right? Jon Robinson has had 2 first-round picks back-to-back years that just have fallen flat on their face for different reasons. These are not similar circumstances that have plagued Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley. They are unique circumstances each that ultimately did garner a similar result. Not exactly the same. Caleb Farley actually made a start. Now, unfortunate for Caleb Farley that he tore his ACL in his first start with the Tennessee Titans due to all the injuries this year. It was going to be our best opportunity to get a look at him outside of like training camp reps against Mike Evans when they had joint practices. But the point being is there are players. Jameson Williams is a good one. John Mechie is another. Now, I don't think those are both first-round draft picks, although it seems like Jameson Williams is being valued that way. A team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who has just gotten up further in the draft order, added additional first-round picks by result of the Tyreek Hill trade, they may think, okay, we've got enough at wide receiver. We can take Jameson Williams. I believe they have the 17th pick. I would have to, Lucas, perhaps you fact check me on that, or where the Chiefs' first-round draft picks are this year, where the Dolphins' pick is that they acquired. Because I think that's a pretty common train of thought. Chiefs would replace Tyreek Hill with somebody who is not maybe as special as Tyreek Hill, but can give them the kind of explosiveness on seam routes that they will lack with Tyreek Hill's absence. Point being, those opportunities will exist. They do every year. There's always an ACL tear. There's always a player with something questionable, injury or otherwise around him that may well be the risk or worth the risk that bears out the reward. We've talked to John about this before, and basically the answer has been once you get in your own head, you have to have confidence about this. You have to have confidence that this is going to work out. Otherwise, you've already undermined yourself. And once you undermine yourself in the draft process where you're fielding calls and picks are flying quickly and you're trying to make sure that you get the best deal for your football team, but also keeping track of your board and taking into account the advice of your regional scouts, your area scouts, all these different things. It's just a million miles an hour once the draft actually hits. And so his position on this the last 2 years is you can't overthink it. You trust your instincts, you trust your research, you trust that you and your staff have done the homework, and you make the selection that you think makes the most sense for the football team. Now, that sounds like a cliche, that sounds like a generality, but I've basically just recited whatever response he'll give anybody who asks him a similar question today. Paxton in Nashville is next. Hello, Paxton.
Yo, what's up, guys? Thanks for taking the call. So, real quick, I would like to know, and that last caller pretty much nailed it, when, you talk about all the I don't want to say flops of, Jon Robinson's first-round selections. But with that being said, how are we going to handle Jeffrey Simmons? Have we already started talking to Jeffrey? I noticed that Jeffrey tweeted out in support of AJ, I think one of his tweets about, trying to get paid or something to that extent. And Jeffrey kind of was like, get your money. Well, Jeffrey Simmons is a huge part of that defensive line, and he's up next. So I kind of want to know how he's kind of going to handle that.
Well, I can answer it off the top, Pax, and they don't have to worry about it. They got the 5th-year option. They got plenty of time on Jeff.
Okay, well, that's great to know. And I want to quickly say this, and I'll get off before I get the Oscar music. Titans fans, everyone calm down. Let's stop with the slander of A.J. Brown. He's not a diva. Any one of us would do the same thing and try to do the, if we had the opportunity to be in a position where we knew our worth, and then we could tell someone, this is my worth, this is what I'm worth for you to pay me. So let's stop with that slander. The last thing, y'all haven't talked about it yet, but apparently Mike Tyson punched some dude on the plane yesterday, and it sucks to be that guy. I'll let y'all go, man.
Thanks, Paxton. From Paxton on a car phone to Jon Robinson at the podium at St. Thomas Sports Park.
First, I'd like to thank Miss Amy for these facilities. This time a year ago, we were kind of huddled up in a small conference room across the street. It's been awesome to be in here in our new draft room, having meetings, talking through things and prospects as we prepare for next week. I'd like to thank a lot of people that have really helped in the team building process. This spring, Coach Vrabel, obviously, discussions we've had back and forth about prospects and fits for our football team. Todd Torselli, our trainers, all the assistant coaches, Chick and Mitch, the personnel department, Ryan Cowden, Monty Ossenfort, John Salge, as we prepare for the draft. And then going back to free agency, Brian Gardner in the pro department, and certainly Vin Marino with the contract negotiation. So with that, excited about next week and another step and another part of the process as we try to put the 2022 Tennessee Titans team together. For questions.
I mean, how much movement is there still to do? What's the last week like leading up to the draft?
Yeah, just going back through. We watched through a couple guys last night as a group. You start the comparisons. This player versus that player. It may be vertically in the position stack, and maybe horizontally, one position versus another position. You're trying to predict guys that are going to go up ahead of where you're picking. Sometimes that's a bit of a crapshoot. So, but just some dialogue as we try to fine tune here heading into next week.
Johnny, I just talked to AJ with everything that's been going on with the receiver market. Where do you stand with him right now?
Yeah, we've had some discussions with his reps. When he was here a couple weeks ago, I talked to him, and working through that. Not going to get into any details with contract negotiations. Never have really done that, but we've made it public about how we feel about AJ and how we wanted to be a part of this football team.
What are your thoughts on how the receiver market has exploded so much when you look at these recent contracts?
Yeah, I don't know what the trends are with that, T, but it's it's interesting to look at and where that has shifted. Every year it seems like certain positions there's ebbs and flows with where those markets goes. A couple years ago, the safety market was down. That's when I think we got Kenny Vaccaro. He was out there for a while, and we were fortunate enough that he was there in August. So, just kind of year to year how those market trends are. Well, I think we're trying to get the best football player that's available for our football team. You're going to need every position at some point. I mean, we saw that last year with 91 different guys that lined up for us. So you're going to need good football players at a lot of different positions over the course of a season. So just try to put ourselves in the best position to take the best player that we think helps our football team.
John, you had a situation, I guess AJ is talking with Deebo Samuel on an Instagram video talking about the terms of the negotiations. You got him requesting a trade. Does any of this make you feel more urgency when it comes to the AJ situation?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about where we're at. I've talked to AJ's reps. AJ knows how we feel about him, how much he means to this football team, and I haven't seen any Instagram videos or Snapchats or Vimeos or any of that kind of stuff.
You've got the same agent representing 3 of the 4 receivers who are in this situation. Does that complicate things in terms of who's first and them all wanting most money?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, we don't really have any control over who reps who. That's up to the individual player and who they select and who they feel, most comfortable with handling their situation. Does it complicate things? I don't know. Our focus right now is with our football team.
Jon Robinson and Mike Vrabel speaking to the media pre-draft right now.
On that several times now, so do not foresee that happening.
Prospects this year, just seem like we've seen a lot of reports you get out.
Tracking the plane, John.
Pretty much. It looks like there's been a lot of reports, specifically with the O-line guy.
Yeah, there was O-lineman certainly at stops that I saw, and there were players at other positions, at some of those stops that I went to. And that's one of the things that Mike and I were excited about, was being able to get back out this spring, be around these prospects on their pro days, watch them work on the field, spend some time with them after their pro days, visiting with them, getting to know them. Maybe you get a little bit more time at the school than you do, certainly in that combine interview where it's 15 or 18 minutes, whatever that is. So you get a little bit more normalcy. The player's in his environment. He's in a meeting room that he's used to on his campus. Get a better feel for, the real guy, as opposed to, maybe what the rat race of the combine is, as those guys are being shuffled from one room to the next room to the next room, and it's a bit of a whirlwind for them.
Picking up on there, can you talk through Zion Johnson and Kenyon Green as prospects?
Yeah, both those guys, the big, strong players. Both guys have played a couple different positions. Really, Zion has played 3 positions. Kenyon's played, both guard and tackle. They're strong. They're good movers. Both of those guys were good when we met with those guys. And, they're good prospects.
Mike, can you chime in there? I know you've got special insight into one from that.
No, I don't think I have anything to add on Zion. Obviously he played next to Tyler, and he's an excellent player, an excellent person. Really, really good person. I'm sorry?
Did he live with you or something?
Yeah, he roomed with Tyler, yeah. They probably didn't say much. Tyler doesn't say a whole lot, and Zion doesn't say a whole lot.
In terms of positions that we need for your roster, just in terms of sheer number, receiver, tight end, offensive line, inside linebacker.
It's a lot of positions, Terry. We need a lot.
But how does this draft stack up depth-wise in some of those spots?
Yeah, I think as we've gone through the process, there's been some position groups that have shown a little more volume, maybe than other positions. But, we feel like that, the positions that can help our football team, again, as I stated earlier, you're never going to know what position you're going to need throughout the course of of an NFL season. And there's players at every position that we feel good about. Now whether they're there when you're able to pick, that's another thing. If I had that crystal ball, the draft would be a lot easier. But no, I think that where our football team is currently and what's available is it's a good thing.
And not having a second round pick right now, does that make it harder to maneuver and get where you need to go?
Potentially, there's creative ways that you can, strategize and try to gain draft capital. Whether it's sliding back from where we're at, whether it's involving, future picks, in next year or the following year. There's ways to kind of put things together to try to put yourself in position to get the player you want.
Is there much interest in that kind of thing now, John? You get phone calls, in terms of moving that closer to the draft day,
Yeah, I think it's probably where we're at, John, in the draft where we're picking. That's a little bit more as you get closer to your pick. It was a different situation back when we had the first pick where, you're trying to strategize to get what you can get from that.
And obviously both you guys hardcore football guys. And Mike, is there anything you look for in players as a head coach that maybe, or something that gets you excited, or something that's a red flag that's different compared to maybe a personnel guy with the coaching background himself?
Well, I think we want to have guys that we trust. I think that's important. We want to evaluate the trust and the ability, and hopefully find those where they match up with high level of trust and high level of ability. You try to, I think where we're at now is trying to get to is this somebody that you want to see every day and coach every day, and have in your meetings. And that's what we try to ask the position coaches, obviously try to find a vision for them and a role and what they're going to do and what they eventually may do for us. I think for me, there is a lot of maybe just traits, character traits that I'm looking for. And then, then we'll go and I'll, go and watch the tape. And I trust everybody's opinion, but I really want to bring great people onto this team.
John talked about how nice it was to get back out on the road this spring. How much did it help you to familiarize with some of these guys and maybe learn a little bit more of what you were just talking about? Yeah,
it's very unfair, the picture that sometimes gets painted from the combine, and I'm probably at fault more most than anybody. the 18 minutes, and these kids are just coming in from the airport, and they're dropping their bags off, and they're getting rushed over to some suite in the dome. And we've had numerous instances where maybe didn't feel great after that short exposure, and then followed up with them either here or on their campus, and then really come out of it with a different opinion. So that is a critical element. And some of these players, they try to think that we want something other than who they really are, because I think that's the best thing, is just for us to try to identify who they really are, what they're going to be like in September and October and November, and not maybe what they think we want them to be in April.
When you look at these receivers, right, they're big guys, they're small. How do you weigh that? Because, you look at your group of receivers now, a lot of them are primarily bigger guys. How do you weigh, evaluating them?
I think you look at opportunities and production, how they catch the ball, how they protect the ball, their willingness to block. Some schools don't ask them to go in there and block. Some of them are running routes, are running, RPOs or relief routes, and trying to pull out defenders that way. What routes have they asked them to run, right? Some guys, it's like, well, he doesn't run it. Well, they probably only have 12 or 14 plays, or they're not running that much of a route tree. How much can he understand and explain about coverage? I think those are all ways that we identify how they play without the ball, how they play with the ball. Are they tough to tackle? Is this a player that's got really good play strength? Can they play inside? Can they return punts? There's a lot of things that we look at.
What do you guys see in this tight end?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good mix. You've got some guys that are dual players. They can play kind of on the line of scrimmage, as well as have the athleticism to detach and play away from the line of scrimmage. There's some guys that can make those move blocks. Some of the things that we asked to do, maybe from the backfield. And then you've got guys who, really they're more detached players. They play predominantly in the slot or on a wing position, and they're pass catchers. But even those guys, the guys that we've watched, there's at least a competitiveness as blockers to at least try to get their nose dirty a little bit in the run game.
You guys talked in the past about the lack of blocking tight ends in college. Can you still find guys there that can do what you need?
Yeah, I think we've identified a few guys that we would, maybe consider in that category. And then also, some of those guys, their skill set can't be overlooked because they are matchup issues against, guys that we try to face, and, we try to decide who's going to cover them on third down. So there are some guys that we've identified, I think, at different levels of the draft, and we're still going through that process now.
That's Jon Robinson and Titans head coach Mike Vrabel at the podium, well, I guess at the table, talking pre-draft press conference. A couple of good nuggets in there. You can react to any of that. 615-737-1045. We'll do the same. Coming up next. Welcome back. Titans general manager Jon Robinson and head coach Mike Vrabel still currently holding their pre-draft press conference. A week to go until the thing goes down in Las Vegas. Blake Wilson has tweeted us at Blake A. Wilson on Twitter. And he says, how is it 2022 and I still can't hear the questions being asked at a Titans press conference? They don't care. Well, they don't care what we have to say. And I understand that, for your purposes, if you're out here, if you're listening to the radio broadcast that when we carry the press conferences, or for the purposes of like the live stream, because I know they put it on YouTube and on Twitter Live too. Yeah, it would be nice to be able to hear the questions being asked. This is a long-going contention between Titans media and like the Titans public relations staff for I don't get too bent out of shape about it, but like the idea that we're being used for their content, they're using us and then giving away all of our good draft nuggets, all the, we need the best 5 guys out there and things of that nature. But here's the thing that I took away from this, and it's still ongoing, and Lucas is keeping tabs on the most noteworthy stuff that we will need to pull and discuss later on in the show and bring some of that audio back for you. But as far as the offensive line is concerned, this is still very much an unknown. We are heading into the situation for this Titans team where the two, who would you say, well, Lucas is in the middle of something. I think the two most important players on the Titans offense, and this will come as no surprise to you, are Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. Probably Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry in that order. Not most important from most talented, not most important from whatever like superstardom, whatever standpoint you want to look at. I'm saying that the Titans go as those two go, right? Their success or failure will be very much placed, the burden of it, very much placed on Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry's shoulders. The thing that both Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry would benefit from exponentially, both of them together, both in situations that are very much up in the air, even as that might feel blasphemous for you to hear about Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry's future is just as much in question as Ryan Tannehill, because the contract situation, the price point that Derrick Henry will come at, and a lot of questions that we won't have the answer to until we see how he comes back in the middle of a season or during a season for another season after this Jones fracture surgery. They'd both benefit a whole hell of a lot from an improved offensive line in front of them. Both of them. You can sustain Derrick Henry at least through the end of his contract if you can just get him just a little more room to run through. You can keep Ryan Tannehill around a hell of a lot longer. You can do a lot better, a lot more with Ryan Tannehill in years to come and not have to worry about the quarterback situation just yet, because he's coming up on, he's only 33, right? Tannehill? There are plenty of quarterbacks who are worse than Tannehill that have played at what's the word I'm looking for? At an older age than 33 or 34. If you can find a way to put off that quarterback replacement situation for a year or two, that'd be swell. The whole situation for Jon Robinson and Mike Vrabel, I think, is very, very much focused on the offensive line this year. And I think that that's the place where you're going to see the primary focus of the upcoming NFL draft for the Tennessee Titans come from. 615-737-1045. Jump in if you like. I want to talk about one critical piece of this offensive line and how it goes in line with the Tennessee Titans philosophy, and why that philosophy is something that just isn't nearly discussed enough. That's next.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. Titans general manager Jon Robinson and head coach Mike Vrabel just finished speaking to the media in their pre-draft address as we are officially 7 days away from the 2022 NFL Draft in Las Vegas. Robinson, of course, asked about A.J. Brown and ongoing discussions for a potential second contract.
Yeah, we've had some discussions with his reps. When he was here a couple weeks ago, I talked to him and working through that. Not going to get into any details with, contract negotiations. Never have really done that. But we've made it public about how we feel about AJ and how we wanted to be a part of this football team.
Robinson also said he does not foresee a trade happening with A.J. Brown. Some big news in college hoops on Wednesday as Villanova head coach Jay Wright announced his retirement after 21 years, 2 national titles, and 4 Final Four appearances, including one this past season. His replacement, Fordham head coach, former Villanova assistant Kyle Neptune. Also another former Titan heading up to Buffalo as right tackle David Quezenberry signed to the Bills on a 1-year deal. He will reunite with his former offensive line mate in Tennessee, Roger Saffold. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour already. Goodness. What a time. Welcome in, welcome back. If you've been hanging out with us so far, I'm Buck Reising. I'm here with you for about 58 more minutes. Lucas Panzica back there making it happen. Going to pull some Jon Robinson and Mike Vrabel audio clips for you from the press conference that they just held. Run a little bit of that back for you. The things that we found the most important from this particular pre-draft press conference. 615-737-1045 is how you react to what you just heard from the Titans GM and head coach. 615-737-1045. That's the number that you dial. So, with all of the different things that are ahead of the Tennessee Titans, Zone TV, the chat is active. Tennessee Tim says, looks like we're going offensive line first round again. And, Lucas brought up this question this morning. Basically, well, it's your question. Do you want to lay it out for people?
About the offensive line?
About the positions in the first round.
Well, I wanted to kind of ask people what position group would they be most upset about, because I figure for a lot of people, the answer is offensive line. Not necessarily because they don't think it's a need, but because of the frustrations that it is still a need.
Frustrations, by the way, which are completely fair. We have talked about, and the only reason why I wouldn't necessarily say that I shot that down this morning, but I feel that we've had that version of the conversation several times. Whether you are getting frustrated every time you click on the newest and next and however many mock drafts that you're looking at, whether it's on Pro Football Focus, who I am preparing to wage war against, at least on social media, or the Draft Network, and you see inside linebacker, right? For example, and you say, how dare they? What idiots? How could they possibly think that the Tennessee Titans, with the 26th overall selection, would take another inside linebacker when they already have 4 on their roster who have play time, who have playing experience?
Or a running back.
Yeah, well, the running back was the one I was like, all right, this guy's an idiot.
Right. It was an outlier, but
right.
Still.
That guy is a dummy.
Breece Hall, future Titan.
Well, Breece Hall, good player, by the way.
Sure.
But no, that's the one. That's the only one where I've stopped in my tracks and said, all right, this is stupid.
Preposterous.
Linebacker, and we've talked about first-round philosophy, right? Best player available. I don't know how many times I need to say it into a microphone before people start to listen to me. Not need, best player available. If the need happens to coincide with best player available, beauty, gravy, you're killing it. Not necessarily a necessity. But the thing that I'm looking at, as far as where they need to go or what they need to do, it's almost almost exclusively on offense. And there's some Mike Vrabel audio, we'll get to it in a little bit, about Caleb Farley that I think is worth your time to hear on the defensive side of the ball, because that's the biggest question, right? What are you doing at outside corner opposite Christian Fulton? And can your first round pick from a year ago finally be a net positive contribution to your team? That's the only thing that I think revolves around the defense right now. I don't think there's much to dispute at all. That, and something that we can get into later, the idea that defensive front, that great and now well-compensated defensive front, basically everybody but Jeffrey Simmons, who will soon receive said compensation, is there any kind of a regression from year over year? All the needs are exclusively on offense. I don't expect them to draft exclusively offensive players. That would be, I think, a bit short-sighted. They could use a third safety. They could use additional depth on the interior defensive line. They could use a variety of different positions on defense, but I'm talking impact. And the question about first-round offensive linemen or rookie offensive linemen is, can you throw them out there right away? Nate Davis was probably the most recent example. He is the most recent example of this. They threw him out there in week 4. Jameel Douglas was atrocious. Threw him out there mid-game against the Atlanta Falcons. He had some growing pains, right? He came into that camp that year. He missed a considerable amount of time with something I think we were only told was like heat exhaustion and nothing beyond that. But then all of a sudden he completely evaporated for training camp. And there were some kinks that they had to work out. He's a third-round pick, came out of Charlotte, lower-level football. All right, we got to work on some mechanical things here. We got to get your stance right. You're coming out of it like a frog would out of a crouching position. We need to adjust how you get off the ball and where your point of attack is, basically. That took some time for Nate Davis to correct coaching. None of these guys are coming in as finished products. So the question becomes, okay, instant impact offensively, do you stand to gain the most by putting, could they theoretically have 2 rookie offensive linemen starting for them this year? I think that would be preposterous. I think at most you're talking 1, because at some point either Jamarco Jones, Aaron Brewer, or Dylan Radins is going to see a considerable amount of playing time. Which one of those materializes, though, is the biggest question that we have. I'm looking at Jon Robinson and the way that he's approaching this and saying, man, in the same way where we looked at Cincinnati last year, and I know we've talked about this before, but in the same way that we're looking at Cincinnati last year and saying, okay, say at a much lower level, not a much lower level, but you're not picking in the Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell range, right? You're not picking top 5. So what do you do in the mid to low 20s when you have a similar situation? Is Treylon Burks better for your team right away, also satisfying a need, also a considerably talented player? Is he better than, say, Zion Johnson, the offensive guard from Boston College, who, of course, as Mike Vrabel articulated, played next to his son, Tyler.
And lived with his son.
And also, Mike Vrabel says they will not be drafting Tyler Vrabel because he says that there could not possibly be a worse situation to happen. Nothing good would come from that. Also, I don't, respectfully to Tyler, I don't think Tyler's not receiving draftable grades right now. I think Tyler Vrabel out of Boston College would be a UDFA. But we'll see. Point being, the instant impact of this is something that they're going to have to weigh against. But none of these guys are fully formed. You're going to be, if it is Treylon Burks, for example, you can't just slot him in there alongside A.J. Brown as you wait for Robert Woods. There will have to be a ramp up. There will have to be installations. There will have to be a package of plays that he learns to execute. And then how much can he do outside of what you've already instituted on a base level? Honestly, that's why I think what they did last year was so impressive, because they were having to do that with veteran players on a weekly basis, on almost a daily basis, and they were finding ways to put together those kind of game plans. The coaching, I'm not worried about. It's just, all right, with all of the considerable needs on offense, tight end is a factor in this as well, even if they'll, as of right now, have to wait to the 3rd round to go and get one at the earliest because of the lack of the 2nd round draft pick. Gator Hater on YouTube writes, first-round pick should make you better, not sit the bench, or make you so frustrated you want to throw a brick through a TV. Okay, well, those are two different things, right? Now, there are degrees of first-round picks. Top 10 players, by talent, are about as low as you go, the 10th overall pick, about as low as you go for immediate. Like, you need him out on the field today. You need Trevor Lawrence as your starting quarterback today. You need Penei Sewell to start at left tackle today. You need Jamar Chase at outside wide receiver today. Tomorrow, yesterday. You need him there right now. Top 10, top 5. Okay? 26, you can give him a little breathing room, right? I know 26 is a first-round pick. 26 is basically a second-round pick. We talked to John Ledyard earlier this week on Monday, Mock Draft Monday, right? John is notoriously stingy as a scout in the media as far as his first-round grades go. Lucas, didn't he say there were nine players with a first-round draft grade this year?
Yeah.
9.
Yeah, less than a dozen.
So that's the way that NFL people, the talent evaluators, are looking at this. Maybe a team or 2 or 3 will have more than 9. Maybe they'll have 12. Maybe they'll have 13. Whatever. But less than